So when you're cutting logs to lumber, the first thing you got to do is you got to cut up the tree. This tree is already fallen down, and obviously it's pretty bad off, but it's still got some usable lumber in it. But so we're bucking this tree that's already fallen. You want to, when you're bucking a tree, you want to cut it from the top and then cut it from the bottom so you don't pin your saw. We got to get to the tree, so we're pushing this tree over with a dozer so we can get to the tree to drag it out. A dozers are pretty handy when you're trying to turn logs into lumber, because you got to be able to get to the tree and pull out pretty heavy trees from pretty remote spots. But this dozer was having a little bit of trouble getting this tree out because the hill was so steep. So we had to turn around and pull it from the front. We usually pull it from the back, but on this one we had to pull it from the front just so we could get our blade in there and pick that tree up off the ground. But once we got it off the ground, it was pretty easy to get it out of that hole. My chain did slip a few times, but other than that, we didn't have that much trouble getting this tree out. And the tree's still pretty good. You can see that the bark's on most of it, but there was a spot or two that was pretty bad. I think this log was 19 feet. We had to get another log, so we had to buck another tree. This one was a little better, but it was a lot larger tree than the one in the previous. Again, you start from the top, cut about halfway through, and then you come up from the bottom so you don't pin your saw. Now, this log ended up being about 30 feet, and you can see we're dragging it straight on instead of with the blade, but it ended up being about 30 feet, so it was enough wood in this one to get more than what we needed. Now we got to cut. We got the log. Now that we got the log to the sawmill, we got to cut this log to the right length so we can put it on the sawmill. The sawmill that I have will only cut up to 20-foot logs, so a log that's 30 foot is not going to work. So we cut it down to probably 15 feet so that we could. That's the size that we're looking for. The saw. This is a pretty new chain on the saw, so it's pretty sharp, but the white oak's pretty tough to cut, so it may look like it's not as sharp, but it's cutting white oak is pretty hard. But this was a pretty big log, or actually a really big log, and the tractor was struggling a little bit to pick it up because it's so big. But you can see that the sawmill does not struggle to pick it up. It does a pretty good job picking logs up. This sawmill is pretty powerful, so anytime we have to pick a log up, it usually does pretty good. Now, when you're cutting white oak, or when we cut white oak, it's some pretty hard wood, and you got to keep that blade lubed with the Woodmizer, which is a watering system, and that keeps that blade cool and keeps it from getting too hot and dulling the blade. But this white oak, it cut pretty good. We had that debarker running, and it was pretty good cutting on this white oak. And you can see we automatically flip the logs off, and the wide boards is where you get into trouble. And this one, we had to cut some pretty wide boards. We probably got some 20-inch wide boards that our blade had to go through, and those get pretty tough. So you want to make sure you water it really good when you're going through those really wide boards. You can see how wide that board is. It just came off the sawmill. But this sawmill will flip the log automatically. Of course, you got joystick controls, but you don't have to flip it with your back. You can flip it with the controls. It's a hydraulic sawmill. Now we'll edge these boards that are being taken off now at the end. So now that we got the sides off, we can this will be the right size for the size we need. I think we needed 2x8s, and so now we can go pretty quick, just cutting the 2x8s. And this thing has a board return on it, so that if you're working, you can bring the boards back to you if you want to load a trailer or whatever you want. And you'll see that here in a minute, that board return. See, we can return those back to our helpers so they can load the trailer. Makes it pretty easy when you're working, so you don't have to stop cutting to wait on people to load. You just bring it back and you can keep going. And we like to put the trailer right there close, so they can just drag it off the sawmill and go on to the trailer. But it makes it really easy when you can just drag it on. But I do have to still help the helpers a little bit here. Now we put 1-inch stacking sticks between our lumber just to keep that air going, because it will start molding after 3 days if you try to stack it on top of each other. So you want to put them stacking sticks there so that it doesn't start molding. You don't want to get it to the customer or try to use it 4 or 5 days from whenever you've cut it and have mold all over it. So you want to use those stacking sticks to keep the mold off. And I try to get all the sawdust off, because that sawdust will mold too. So there's going to be some sawdust still on the board. I just take a broom, or you can do a sheetrock knife, whatever, and scrape off that dust so that it doesn't mold your board. Now this sawmill will cut down to 1 inch. I think they say 1 inch, but I usually go 1.5 inches because I don't want to hit the stops that are on there. But now we're going to put these live edge boards back on there and edge them to the proper size. These things are huge. I mean, some of them are 20 inches, I believe. But you can put them all on there at one time and stand them up, and then edge them to the proper width that you want. But you do have to flip these over and cut both sides to get them to the width you want.